All right, so hello everybody. Please turn on your cameras, okay? Right, so I think everybody uh, who's supposed to be here is here. Um, just for taking attendance, could you just in the chat send me a thumbs up or okay or anything of that? You don't have to write anything meaningful. So just see your names. Cool. Awesome. All right. So I hope everybody's doing okay. A few things. So I hope you will like this arrangement I made regarding the split of the class. Probably if you just look at the gallery view of this Zoom call, you would see that the number is more manageable. You can at least get hold of how many people are in the same call. But so I want to add some, probably you saw it already, but I will stream every lecture on YouTube in addition to being recorded on the Panopto system. And so if people like to watch, so if let's say on Mondays and Fridays, you don't want to be here, but you like just to watch the lecture on time, you can go to the YouTube streaming link, which I would post recorded videos, so they would prefer to watch. Am I frozen now, or am I back?
You're back now. It was frozen for a second.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I was saying it's another option, like on Mondays and Fridays to watch it. So that's that. The lectures. So I will also upload the lecture slides. This week, the slides for this week, are uploaded. So yeah, I'm just going to share my screen right now, and we shall start. All right. Cool. So welcome to the very first real lecture. And so here's what we're going to talk about today. By the way, the reading is uploaded right now. Quite honestly, this is just going to be an introduction of what communication research is. And so I'm going to explain why is it important to study research in the field of communication, what communication research is all about, how can you use communication research for academic purposes, for professional purposes, and how communication research or social science research in general is both a way of acquiring knowledge, and it's also a way or a method for persuasion. So I'm going to talk about that, and then how it's related to your to career opportunities and what that implies for studying research. So I'll start. So you can just nod when I ask, or mostly those are rhetorical questions. But have you heard or read these claims before? So violent video games increase criminal behavior. Smartphones make people addicted to technology. Kids nowadays have a shorter attention span. Like social media influencers increase the sales for beauty brands. Looking at magazine covers make people insecure about their bodies, and large size portions encourage people to eat more. Right. So have you heard about these claims before? Those are all claims. And so the question is, how do you know if they are true or not? Right. Each of these claims has a proposed relationship between a cause and effect, or like two phenomena taking place together. So how do we know these are true? And the answer is research. And so in this case, these are some of the claims that I've mentioned are just some examples of large topics or themes that you would read tons. Maybe if you are in communication field, you read a lot of research about different papers taking different positions on these claims that I've just mentioned. They want to show empirical support for either a proven or a positive relationship or like unproven relationship, right? And so this process by finding an association and then trying to provide the support that it's actually true and it exists strongly is what we call empirical research. Um, has anyone heard the word empirical before? Do you know what it means, roughly speaking? Any guesses? What comes to mind when yeah, go,
Oh,
Kelly.
I was gonna say it's like an observation, right? Or like kind of like an experience, or on like a not on a theory, or like it's like pure logic.
Well, you were actually right before you said pure logic. So empirical, empirically, yeah, it's exactly. You mentioned two-thirds of empirical research, which is observation and then experimentation. So it probably, if you remember something about scientific method in a science class at some point in your elementary education, but it's basically it's the idea of that you can know the truth by systemic observation. You come up with a hunch, then you experiment to see if that hunch or what we would call hypothesis is true or not, and then validation, which is meant to test, okay, did I get the results that I expected to get or not? And then if you got what expected, then you have a working theory or like a supported theory. And then you keep working. And by you, I mean the whole community of scientists, we keep working on it in order to address gaps, to see, to address or test counterclaims, etc. So empirical means something that is measurable and it follows specific steps for finding the truth. And it's also known as the scientific method, right? The empiricism is also a philosophical approach, which when I say philosophical, it means they are presumptions you make about reality. And in that sense, in an empirical mindset, believes that truth can actually be found even if it's hard. There are systemic efforts that if you do right, and please pay attention to the word right. If you do right and it's a sound approach, then you will arrive at the truth. The truth is not hidden. It's not abstract. You can actually discover the truth. And that doing it right requires the three steps that I just explained: observation, reflection, experimentation, and then confirmation. or disconfirmation. And then that will produce you a scientific body of knowledge. That is to say, you produce logical consistency when you move from observation to experimentation. So you see your experiments logically follow the claim you wanted to prove. Maybe this sounds abstract at this point, but it'll get clearer as we move on. So what do we mean then by theory? So we know what empiricism or empirical research is. What is theory then? So for instance, we use the word theory. How do we use the word theory in our everyday language? What do we mean by that? So forget about science. When we say theory in everyday language, what do we mean by?
We mean guess.
Right. You guess about what? You guess about what?
The truth.
Right. So you guess about the truth. Let me give you an example. So assume the professor is late 15 minutes to the lecture, right? And then the students are wondering what actually happened. And so each student will come up with a theory. Like there might be a technical problem, something went wrong. Maybe he's not in a place where there is a Wi-Fi signal. Maybe he totally forgot. Maybe he was. Those what we call working theories. And those theories claim an explanation of the things that you are experiencing to what's happening to the actor or the cause of that event, right? So a theory is always then, in a scientific sense, means an explanation of how things work and how they are related. For example, when we say, if you remember the claims I had in the first slides, violent video games increases criminal behavior. So that's an association, right? We call that an axiom. But how or why, right? In order to explain that why, that movement from violent video games cause A to the or X to the effects criminal behavior, which is Y, you need a working theory. What does explain that, if it's true, right? So always when we say theory, it has to be an explanation of something that is observed, but the theory itself is not something that you can touch. It's not something that you measure. It's actually a framework you put to explain empirical like findings. Remember empirical, something based on observation, experimentation. That's what theory means. And so communication theory is just they are frameworks to explain how communication works or how communication relationship works between different actors. You can think of different things. So let's say you can apply it to persuasion. So why people are drawn into candidate A, for example, as opposed to candidate B. What is about their appearance, their way of speaking, their language, the symbols they put, the campaigning they use, etc., etc. You would have a theory that explains this attraction between a candidate and audiences. So the same applies to, for example, TV shows. So why does some TV shows draw more viewers than others? You then come up with a theory that explains, okay, this type of content, because it evokes those types of emotion, people will be drawn to this show, right? So these are all theories that explain facts, right? And they have to be logical. So if you read it, you could follow, okay, I see how is A is connected to B is connected to C, right? So that's a theory, right? So I hope at this point you're aware of the difference between what we mean by empirical, what we mean by theory. And so all of this, I'm giving you these foundations in order to understand why is it important to be research oriented. So we all the time come up with claims all the time, right? It's better to invest on Bitcoin, or it's better to leave California. Okay, so then why? Regular people make claims all the time, but if you're research oriented, you'll learn this idea is like backing up your claims with facts or data, and then coming up with theories, logical explanation that show the association between the two parts of your claim, right? And so if you go into the field of communication, or for that matter, any field, you will encounter market and media reports. You would look at economic indicators and commercial trends. You'll see what's happening in society, what's happening in the media, the new trends, let's say, in everything, in lifestyle, in fashion, in investment, etc., etc. And then you have to say it simply, put the pieces together, like understand, okay, I could see why if we do A, it would lead us to B. And so that's the difference between coming up with explanations intuitively versus research-driven claims and proposals. Any questions at this point around being very clear? Okay. And so what would you benefit then, hopefully by the end of this semester, is like you would have an ability to read academic articles and research reports. Let me tell you that many of these academic articles are not written in a very accessible language. And that's for a reason, because academic articles by nature are written by academics for academics and academic journals. So these would be subscription-based, so you can only access them via a university library system, and it's written by academics, while the audience for that is also other colleagues or peers. So they all speak in the same lingo. They all want to explore and expand about the theories they've been debating about. And so if you as an outsider would read it, yeah, there are many things that you won't quite get. Aside from the fact that it also involves things like statistical analysis and all of that, which if you're not trained within the research method tradition, you wouldn't be able to understand the reasons for using it or what's the values that they're talking about. And so what we would try to achieve with this course is at least to give you, like to make you take the first step into that world. So yes, you would be able to read academic articles and understand why they made such and such claim and what level of support they provided, and whether this support is valid or not, or reliable or not, right? And that would not necessarily be reflected in then you becoming an academic researcher, but hopefully when you do research in your professional career, so if you're writing a research report for your bosses or your clients, you would at least become aware of the tools of language, what level of data support that you need to provide, and what level of logic you need also to propose to support your claims. So that's for the value. And then you may ask what topics we would be talking about, or what type of claims we will explore in this course. So this is not a theory class. This is a method class. So we will talk more about the ways people try to discover the truth, as someone has said, or facts. That's a more humble word. And also how to be critical of these claims. But many things, so communication researchers study different things. So there are people who study media psychology, so things such as violent video games and film content. Some study media and technology, so how data algorithms with social media, let's say, affects consumer rights. Data privacy and regulation is also an emerging field that people are talking about, which is very timely, actually. So in the news, political communication and voting behavior is also something that we study in the communication field. Influencer marketing and digital campaigns, and that's actually my niche. That the thing that I'm mostly interested in. Product placement and native advertising. So if you guys know what product placement is? Have you heard of that before?
Yeah, it's like in movies where like they place like companies pay the movies to like put their products in it. It's like Castaway, that like a volleyball.
Yes, Wilson and FedEx, right? So do you think that is effective or not?
I think it could be effective because it's like it spreads the brand awareness. It kind of makes it part of the pop culture. But I actually think nowadays influencer marketing is more effective among young people.
Right. So what Anna did, she provided a quasi theory. She mentioned something about brand awareness. So if you see the brand in a show you like, you're actually expanding the awareness of that brand. But then the counter argument would be, then why don't just do ads? Julian, you were nodding when I say you think it's effective. You were nodding. Why do you think product placement is effective?
I just think that just putting it in popular culture like familiarizes people with the brand and makes them want to, buy it more if they're more familiar with it. So.
And how is that different than just regular commercials?
Well, I feel like people maybe don't pay attention to commercials as much as like movies and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And they don't like commercials may not mean as much as like movies. Some people can get really attached to movies and stuff. So I feel like just like having a deeper connection makes it more effective.
Right. So you mentioned, so Julie mentioned two theories right there. So the first claim was about attention, right? So people during popular shows pay more attention to the brand than regular commercials. Is that something we can actually test or not?
I heard one way to test it is pay attention to commercials or to pay attention to the product. It's maybe like I heard there's like some people who like at like surveys like, did you know what product or what kind of car this person was using or what kind of drink that they were using, and if you were able to identify it, you can tell or not. Versus like surveys.
So we pick a specific show and then we ask the viewers, okay, do you recall let's say the coffee brand in that episode versus people who watch the commercial? Do you recall that coffee brand in that commercial? And we see if you see more attention reported for people who paid attention during the show, then yes. So that's one claim, and we see it's a theory, and then it can be proven or supported by empirical research, right? So something based on observation, experimentation, and then we test the data. And the other claim Julian made, which is more about emotional connection, because not only we don't pay attention to commercials, or at least the theory goes, mentally, but also emotionally. So even if you're watching the commercial, it doesn't connect with you at an emotional level, right? That's a theory. And so, but if it's being used by a likable character in a show or a movie that you like, or a story that you're engaged with, then we see actually that you would relate deeply more to the brand. So that's a theory. So you see how that's an actual theory, by the way. I won't get you much into details, but that's something I've done some research on. And then that's also something we can measure. So we have a claim, right? Then we took that claim into and then analyzed its how do I say primary components, what exactly the construct we think is driving that effect, and then we test it, right? So if we're talking about attention or emotional engagement, we would test attention and we would test emotional engagement. And as you can see, just from this simple topic, we could come up with numerous research ideas and numerous experiments and ethnographies and whatnot. Right? So that's why I think research is fun. So yeah, so we also like research things, so peer influence and drinking habits, prejudice and portrayal of ethnic groups and media effect on children, storytelling and branding, etc., etc. Now let me ask you another question. So how would you know that violent video games lead to violent behavior? So take a minute. You don't have to come up with an answer real quick, but think about this along the lines of what we've been discussing about observation, reflection, experimentation, then generalization. How would you come up with a plan, or let's say a study, that try to test this claim?
So maybe you could grab a control group, a group of like people that don't play video games and like analyze their behavior. And then you have a group of people who do play video games, and then you analyze their behavior and see have like a list of what you consider as a violent act. And then like if kids who are playing video games, the group that's playing video games is like acting in a more violent way, then you can prove that claim.
Okay. So Jared made some interesting points. So so probably I would assume you took a business class before, because you mentioned control group. So control group meaning a group that has not been exposed to whatever stimulus you're talking about. So in this case, violent video. So Jared's proposition is, put simply, we will take a group of people who play video games and compare them to people who don't play video games and observe their behavior to see if group A is more violent than group B or not, right? So the group that play video games is more violent than the group that do not. And Jared mentioned a very interesting thing, actually. He said, we measure what you would consider violent behavior. Is that correct? Right? Which means we have to have a pre-established criterion for what constitutes violent behavior. So even before we get to prove it, we actually have to define it and actually agree upon specific criteria or specific manifestations, say, of violence. And people would disagree. You could guess, like, people disagree with that. That's what we call a warrant, but I'll leave that to next lecture. But I wanted to point that out. So what do you think? Does anyone see any flaw or limitation in what Jared has proposed? Why would...
Sorry.
Who's talking? Yeah, Emily, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely what I would choose too. But I still obviously see flaws, and it's something like there are a bunch of things that you have to address before going into it. And like you said, like you do have to have your own definition of what a violent act is, and that can present problems if like it is not an acceptable definition by the people that are viewing the study, or something like that. I think it can also, there's some difficulty in like asking people to self-report whether or not they engage in violent acts, because there can be a difference in them self-reporting that, and like maybe the people in their lives think a different thing, and that can present difficulties. But yeah, that's what was on top of my head. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, you mentioned two interesting points. So first of all, yeah, what would be considered violent, and then the idea about self-report. So if you ask them, how exactly would we assume that, assuming you are violent, I would assume like in a survey you will ask, yeah, I'm actually a very violent person. Like, or like, yeah, I just I just smashed my neighbor's window. Like, yeah, no one. Or assume the majority of people won't report that, even if they do. But assuming, then I'll come up with a counterpoint, Emily, saying, okay, we do have um, actually way to monitor these people. So assuming they are in schools or like their parents agreed, or through algorithms, so everyone plays online, and then we can actually to put the ethics aside. Actually, don't in real life, but just in this moment, put the ethics aside and assume you can actually observe their behavior neutrally. They don't have, so you won't get the self-reporting bias. What would still be a problem for this specific research idea?
Oh, there could be other factors. Because I mean, it's kind of
That's
just a correlation thing.
right. That's the word I wanted to hear. Right. So could you expand? So what do you mean by correlation? What is a correlation?
Well, correlation is basically just like you kind of you find two factors that are traveling together, if that makes sense. So it's like one factor is increasing while the other is decreasing, or some other combination. But correlation doesn't necessarily indicate causation. So you can basically you can graph correlation with any 2 points. And like some people do assume that that means causation, but it really doesn't. It's just 2 points graphed
Right.
together, basically.
Yeah. So I would try to translate that. So is the idea? So so playing video games and let's say aggressive behavior go up together, but that doesn't prove by itself that playing video games is the cause for violent behavior to go up. And I'll come with two counter explanations. It could be that that's actually the opposite is true. So violent people or people with violent predispositions will be more drawn towards violent video games. So you see the directionality here? It's actually because they like violence, they started playing video games, right? But even if they stop playing video games, they're still violent, and then they will express that violent behavior at some other domains, right? So that's one counter explanation. Another one, counter explanations. It could be the third cause or a third factor that is causing both A and B. So let's say people who lack maybe social support, or people who have problems at home, right? So they have like abusive parents or missing parents or family that went towards trauma. So they will compensate for that by playing video games and also being violent in the street, right? But that doesn't mean that video games cause that violent behavior. There's like a third factor, external factor that caused both the violent behavior and, let's say, reliance or playing video games, violent video games. So you see, so I come up with two counter, and so that's just one example of how research gets complicated. Hence, we will talk about this. We'll talk about different theories. So when you come up with an explanation of why X causes Y, there has to be a theoretical foundation that relates to human nature. So I'm assuming the relationship go this way because here's what we know about human nature. And if we apply it to this phenomenon, then this how it should go. And then we talk about data collection, and then we talk about warranting. That is to say, how do we know that we're measuring is exactly the thing we intended to measure, right? So when we say you're testing violent behavior, how did you define it in a way that everybody would agree upon and say, okay, this is exactly the thing we are testing? So I hope this wasn't too much, but it just show you, like, I think it's an interesting way to get you drawn into research. Yes, Ray, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to also add like another counter to yours. I mean, you can also say that like I mean, I have a bunch of friends that play video games, honestly, and I can't get them out, like get them to come outdoors. Although it may like promote aggressive behavior, it actually reduces the time that they can actually engage in antisocial behavior. So like it takes them away from society and puts them indoors to where they don't commit any crimes or violent behavior as well.
Right. So what you mentioned is actually, so you see all of the points we made. That's why this is one of the questions that if you ask communication scholars about, no one would agree. So this question has been studied since, I would say, 1980s, and up to this point, there's no consensus being reached, because some scholars do say, as a matter of fact, that violent video games are actually good venues for some people to express their antisocial tendencies. That it might be bad, but if you have the choice between you trolling some people online or just shooting them versus going out into the streets and hurting people, you would say, you know what, it's better just to do violent behavior online, right? So that's actually one, like, and some actually even propose it might have some therapeutic effects. And actually, some people believe that, just outside of the scholars. So some people say, you know what, I just like to play, shoot some people, and then it's a way for rewinding, right? I just do it, get it out of my system. You hear that word a lot, right? And then, yeah, I'll become normal. So yeah, you hear that. So you would see counterpoints like that. So yeah, it's one interesting question. So that's research as a way of acquiring knowledge. Research is also a way of an argument. That is to say, if you have a research mindset, you can take a problem like the one we mentioned and then structure it and present it as if it's a research claim or idea. And so every argument in research has like three components. The first one is a claim. That's the first component of a research argument. And claims can be based off anecdotes, gut feelings, assumptions, biases, deceptions, etc. So when Anna says, for example, influencer marketing now is more effective than product placement, it's based off either her just observing what's happening around her, like either with her friends, what she sees in social media. Maybe she read some reports or like watch a news story about it. Okay, like everybody is talking about influencer marketing, so it must be the thing right now in marketing. These claims can be then taken to be tested in a scientific sense and can be either supported or refuted. So if you do either a study on influencer marketing, so let's compare the effectiveness actually be defined. Talk about that in a minute. If there's I lost connection for a second. So everybody's back? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I was saying we have to, like, if we say, for example, we want to measure effectiveness of the campaign, we have to have a benchmark. So if it's above, if we see a 10% difference in increase, let's say sales or visits to the store, then that would be our standard by which we refute or support the claim, accepted or rejected. So yeah, an example, what is the good evidence that a specific ad is beneficial to a brand? We have to test it, and then we put standards what beneficial is. So do it mean sales? Do it mean visits to the website, clicks, etc. That part, this part right here, rules for refutation or support, it was what we call claim. So, sorry, warrant for the claim, sorry. So a claim is just your proposition. Data is data. So data is the collected description of reality. And then warrant is the standard by which we evaluate, do the data support our claim or not, okay? Here's an example. So claim number one, music education enriches a person's intelligence. The data point is studies prove that children who are exposed to music at young age score higher on aptitude tests later in life. And so since proven to prove IQ score should be part of a school curriculum. So actually the part after the comma is not really part of the warrant, but the warrant here is we took an IQ test as our standard for measuring how the data is supporting the claim, right? So you see, when we say, for example, it enriches a person's intelligence, we have to define personal intelligence somewhat, and we agree, okay, what is an enriched point? So we would say, okay, personal intelligence, we're gonna measure it by IQ, and then if it's higher than the average person, or higher than people who don't are not exposed to music as children, then we would take that as a standard by which we would support this claim, right? So you see what we mean by warrant right here? The part here after the comma is actually the takeaway, but that's so it's the point that Emily was making when we say it increases violence. We have to define violence very precisely and then put a benchmark or standard upon which we would say, okay, if it passes that test, then it's an actual increase in violence, which supports the claim on that. So you cannot come up with a research idea before establishing the warrant or the standards. So yeah, I think I explained what data is. Hypothesis is the claim or relationship between two concepts. We explained that. Scientific method is the rigorous observation and testable. So you observe some phenomena and then you test it. And a variable, I mentioned this word, is like a specific unit in a hypothetical relation. So right here, the variables are music education and person's intelligence. That's variable X and variable Y. And then we assume that variable X leads or increases variable Y. And you can apply that when we talk about video games. So playing video games is variable X. Aggressive behavior is variable Y, and we would assume that or propose or test that variable X increases variable Y. So variable is something that has to vary, right? Hence the word, it has to vary. So yeah. So this is actually part of next week's lecture, but I think we can just and so briefly, I just want to mention that when we say research, we could mean two things: either academic research or professional research. So academic research follows the things we've been talking about. It's the rigorous, detailed, theory-oriented approach of studying the relationship between variables. It usually takes a long time to produce, and it follows very specific procedures. Whereas professional research is when you do collection about data or about facts, and then you present that data and then take out the major takeaways or like the policy proposals based upon those data. So it doesn't follow the same rigor that scientific research follows, but it still follows the same principle. So the idea is it has to be also data driven. However, it does not necessarily involve a theory. So for example, if you're an investor and I will tell you home prices are decreasing in LA, we should buy now. Me and you, are we interested into the theory of why home prices are decreasing? Or just the fact that they are decreasing, let's buy, and then we will make a profit later, right? You might be at a personal level interested, right? So it could be about COVID, but that question by itself does not concern you. You're concerned about making good recommendations to your client or your manager or your boss in order to make good investment, right? That's why when you read professional research, they don't spend a lot of time talking about theory or the reason why. It's mostly looking at correlations, right? So here are correlations, and here how we can benefit from them. Does that point clear? If you right, and so Kerry, if you rely on research, you can work as a market analyst, advertising account manager, policy consultant, digital analytics, community outreach, strategic planner, branding expert. Those are things that all require some form of research competency. And so we want to deal specifically with professional use of research. But from the topics that we're going to discuss, I encourage you to see or to think ahead of how whatever we discuss in this class can be useful for you in a professional or personal sense. You might not see it right away, but hopefully as we move on, you will try to get, okay, here's this idea that I can actually use for like a job proposal or a personal project and things. So that's it. This part I'm actually going to post to the discussion board, so you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, I'll be asking you by next Monday to just come up with a research idea, like something you found in the news or something, and then you just frame it as I did with the examples we gave in this lecture. Like, here's the claim this story or this piece or this person is making. Here's the data they would need to support the claim, and then here's the word or standard by which we can either support or reject. I'll post details about this in the discussion board. So yeah, that's it for today. Are there any questions?
I have a question. Just like what kind of research is going on in University of San Diego? I guess there's not much because of COVID, but like if we wanted to know.
Research that I personally conducted?
It doesn't have to be just you.
No, actually, okay, yeah. Some faculty who has been here before me, actually, they do research. So we will actually include articles by faculty members in this course. So I'll talk about the research they do, but I know, for example, Bradley Bond does a lot of research on kids and on LGBT representation in the media. Professor Bowman does research on like interpersonal relationships and small group communication and support, like emotional support between friends and things like that. yeah, Dr. Stern, she does research also in children. I do research on influencer marketing. I just started, actually finished a new one, but it was done online. But yeah, there is research happening. Yeah, if we can talk more about it in details later. Yeah, cool. All right. So if you don't have any question, you're free to go. So hope to see you next.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You.
Professor, I had a quick question for you, sir.
That's Ray. Who's
Yeah.
Okay,
So, hey, so just to be clear, are we supposed to attend this Friday's class if we attended Monday, Wednesday's class, or how does that go? I'm kind of confused about that.
I was gonna ask the same exact question. I was gonna say.
Okay. Okay. So if you read, okay, so one half of the class should attend Mondays, one half should attend Wednesdays, and then you personally choose 5 Fridays to attend.
Gotcha.
Right? You don't have to email me. Yeah, so it could be the Friday of week 1, week 3, week 4, week 7.
Got it.
If you want to attend all Friday classes, you're welcome. This is your class. If you feel more comfortable just in classes that you're not required. So Monday, if you just feel more comfortable watching it on YouTube or watching the recorded video later, that's an option you have.
So
this is only a way to make it easier on you. That's it.
So classes on Monday and Wednesday, are they going to be the same class? Like, are you going to?
No, they're not. No, it's not. I'll teach as if it's like a regular class, so it's not going to be the same lecture.
Okay.
But the whole point is, there are different reasons of doing this. But one reason is as I said, it's difficult, and I want to give more flexibility to students, right? I didn't want to make it fully asynchronous, but I want students to give the option of at least watching some lectures recorded if they want. And the other reason is also just for class discussion. I just feel if you have 18 students in one Zoom call, it's easier to have a discussion than having 35 students.
Okay.
Just based on experience.
Okay.
And so yeah.
Got it.
But yeah, if you want to attend on Fridays, you're welcome.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, so just to touch on that one more time, Professor. So required, like, should it be who of us to watch the videos that you post on Monday or Wednesday? Like, should we be watching those videos, or is it like something that like it's going to be covered in the lecture that you're actually supposed to attend?
No, you should be watching them. Yeah. You should watch all the videos. Yeah. So in the classes that you do not attend, you have to watch. You can watch it live because they are streamed, or you can watch it later because they get recorded. But yeah, you still have to keep
okay, it's just for flexibility.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.